Boom. We're in
Goes the
there.
dynamite.
How's
Boom,
everyone
we're in
doing?
there. Yep.
It
First take.
is. We are back with another episode of Verse Take. It's getting chilly outside,
Mm, dated the
but
podcast.
well, it's just a chilly day. But like
Getting
this,
chilly outside. It must have been, gosh, December 3rd.
well, the it's cool outside, but the thing is, the poet that we have today has had me listening to not only a lot of blues, which we'll get into later, but also a
Mm,
lot of
mm, mm.
jazz.
Okay, yeah. I was listening to some Christmas jazz today, actually. Dave Brubeck. So
Okay.
for all you jazz fans out there, listen to Dave Brubeck's Christmas album. It's excellent. Or, classic Dave Giraldi. Uh, right? It's Dave Giraldi?
Mm.
Vince Giraldi. Sorry, Vince Giraldi with the Peanuts Christmas album. So,
Okay, well that's also pretty good. I but I was actually listening to, I think it's what is, yeah, Curtis Fuller.
oh yeah, right. Yep,
Curtis
yep,
Fuller.
yep,
His
yep,
his big
yep.
song is Stormy Weather. So
Mhm,
I've been
mhm,
listening to that trombone solo. Trombone
mhm,
is
mhm,
holds a place close to my heart. I was actually in the jazz band, played trombone in
mhm,
the jazz
mhm,
band, but
mhm, mhm.
by by 10th grade I started playing bass in the jazz band. So
Mm,
left the
yeah.
trombone behind, started playing bass, but like this poet, our poet, and no surprise, it's Langston Hughes. It's got me
Mhm.
listening to much more jazz. Got me listening
Yeah,
to a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
jazz.
This is the second jazz poet in a way that we've done. I don't know if you could, you wouldn't always call Kerouac a jazz poet, but
Mm,
because there are
yeah,
poets that you call like jazz poets, like,
right.
but
Definitely
from
jazz inspired.
for sure, and we've talked about it a lot so far. Um, I didn't realize it before this, but man, because I had never listened to Langston Hughes read
And I hadn't
before
either.
this last week, and
I
which
just
is
remember him from
crazy,
school.
right? Yeah, exactly. And for some reason, I just thought he was like I kind of knew, Harlem Renaissance, 1920s, 1930s, but it's just kind of I still for some reason felt like it was farther away in some way.
Mm,
Didn't expect to, be able to, hear him actually read poems and had no idea that Kerouac was really just doing his best Langston Hughes, with a lot of
mm.
that stuff. And for me, first time hearing it, I'm thinking like Kerouac's great. You know,
Yeah,
I guess a lot of people felt that way. They're like, "Oh man, Elvis is great." And they're like, "Oh yeah, Chuck Berry, I guess he's pretty good too." You know,
yeah. It might be a
yeah,
situation like that because
right.
the resemblance is almost too stark to not mention. Like
And yeah,
it's
for the
almost
intonation, I
right,
mean, even just what he kind of attempts to do with Steve Allen on that album.
right,
I mean,
which is
it's
all
great. I
great.
love
Don't
it.
get me wrong.
I love it.
Kerouac,
Yes,
Kerouac's
100%.
definitely one of my
Yeah,
favorites,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
think Langston Hughes may be one of
Hmm.
my favorite poets.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
from
No,
doing this
like, yeah.
podcast,
Hmm.
I've arrived at that from hearing
Yeah.
him read his poetry.
Mm,
And so
hmm,
we're gonna
hmm.
read. We're gonna obviously read some poems. We each
Right,
picked a
right,
poem to read about Langston Hughes.
right.
For
Yeah, I mean, we're brimming. Like, we just want to kind of get into them, huh?
but
Yeah.
for those listening, if you get a chance, please listen to Langston Hughes read his poetry. It's excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
No,
excellent.
no, it's actually great. Yeah, no, I wish we could, put some of it on here,
Yeah,
but
maybe, but
even then, I don't, no, no, it's fine, it's fine. Hey, look, we read the poems here, okay? Uh, for
I
all of you who don't know, at Verse Take,
right.
James and I, we are the readers of poets, or of poems. So,
And
that's how it works.
yeah, and speaking of thinking Langston Hughes was further away, I knew the Harlem Renaissance was in the 20s, but I thought Langston Hughes maybe in his 50s or 60s in the
Mm,
during the
yeah,
Harlem
right, right.
Renaissance. I
Yeah,
didn't.
he's a younger guy, that's for sure, during that time.
Yeah, he's actually like in his like later 20s, like when the Renaissance was pretty much getting rolling.
Yeah, well, that is kind of interesting too, because kind of in my head, I have a picture of Langston Hughes when he is a bit older, but I associate him when he's a bit older. That picture I have of older Langston Hughes with the time that he's most associated with
Right.
his younger Harlem Renaissance time.
Right.
But
Yeah.
those are like different guys,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
those are at different times, That's not what he looked like. That's not the guy that was in
No. No. No.
the
No.
Harlem Renaissance. So, um,
Right.
yeah,
And that because yeah, I do. The image in my head of Langston Hughes is kind of an older guy, but his time,
right.
but during the time period he's known from, he was a bit of a younger guy, and I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's kind of what was maybe a bit so impressive of the time, or one of the signposts of the time. The Harlem Renaissance. There were a lot of new ideas coming
Hmm.
in, a lot
Hmm.
of a lot of new energy kind of swirling
Hmm.
around the country at the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't quite realize either. I don't know if like if you had just questioned me and said, "Hey, who's the first, you know, like black African American person to live strictly off their writing to make it as a professional writer?" I don't, I could have, if you gave me a list, I might have said, yeah, sure, maybe Langston Hughes, maybe it was him. But I didn't know that. I might have even
Mm,
said, I don't know, maybe, Frederick Douglass, someone like that. Maybe they lived off their writings alone.
yeah.
I would have I didn't quite realize that it was him, which makes him like even kind of a bigger sort of figure, on a societal level.
Right.
Um, which yeah, like he's like definitely a key person. I heard some people like I listened to some podcasts and some people said or watched some YouTube videos and things and they hear people talking about him and some folks kind of refer to him as being sort of like underrated or like more people need to know about him but I'm like I mean hey we're talking about him 100 years later like
Yeah.
this guy made his mark
For sure.
100%
For
but
sure.
um yeah I mean he kind of made maybe a bigger mark than I realized before getting into this.
Yeah, and well said, well said. I concur. I concur. I think that Langston Hughes definitely deserved more of my attention. But I remember him from school, and maybe that's kind
Right,
of the
right.
thing. Like we learned,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we
yeah,
did a little
yeah.
bit. We did some of them in school, and I just felt like, oh, maybe I got it. And you always hear the name, and I don't know, but I don't know quite what it was. I can't put my finger on it, but reading some of his poetry, especially some of his blues poetry, has been excellent. Especially like, for any fans of the blues, especially those, old school down home, like acoustic like Mississippi Delta blues. Maybe your Lead Bellies, your Book of Whites, and
Hmm. Hmm.
even people like even a fan of the early electric blues like Howlin' Wolf, the blues all across the southeast. I kind of associated Langston Hughes much more with jazz, and I'm
Yeah,
not and
yeah.
like and obviously I was in the jazz band in high school, stuff like that, but
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I actually had didn't listen. I actually have listened to much more blues than jazz,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
even would consider
Right, right,
myself to
right.
even play and perform much more blues esque music on the guitar. So to just read some of Langston Hughes blues poetry, full of rhythm,
Hmm.
full of a lot of the
Hmm.
imagery of
Hmm.
the blues.
Yeah, yep.
Just it's almost. I mean, it's been excellent poetry.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah. And see me, I've been more of a jazz fan,
mm,
I think over the years. So, it's kind of interesting to, maybe approach him from that aspect too. But yeah, I mean the blues side of him, all the blues poems that he wrote, um, I mean they are fantastic.
right.
Which I don't know. Are you ready to get into the poems?
I mean,
You
we
want to
may,
keep
we
going
may, we
about
may.
him a little bit?
I mean, we may as well let's get into the poems. Let's get into his poetry, but maybe not
Yeah.
necessarily our poems yet. But let's
Okay.
just talking
Okay.
about
Okay.
some of the tropes of the blues, since because you are doing one of his
That's what I was
poems.
gonna say. I was like, that's a perfect leeway into like, hey, we're talking about blues poems.
It was a great segue,
I got
and
one right for you, you
don't
know?
give me keep that segue hot and ready on deck. But let's go over some of the tropes of the blues so that people may
hmm
better
hmm
understand like where Langston Hughes is coming from. As you know, as people
hmm
know, the
Yeah, yeah,
blues
yeah.
the blues is known for have it's known for its sort of 12 bar structure, and where
hmm
you might have like 4 bars where one line takes up 4 bars. The next line is often repeated or subtly
hmm
changed, and
hmm
that line will
hmm
also take up 4 bars. And then you'll have sort of like a turnaround where it'll
hmm
be sort of
hmm
like a rejoinder to those first 2 lines. And
hmm
so
hmm
that's like
hmm
one trope of the blues. And you'll have several verses, and like oftentimes it'll the beat will be sort of like a dragon beat,
hmm hmm
da dum da dum da dum, da 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 dum da dum, or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. That's just a
yeah, yeah,
common one.
yeah,
But
yep, yep. hmm
these are just sort of tropes in the blues. But what I love about the blues is sort of the content of the blues. A lot of blues songs, and the blues is a strange place. The blues is a place where mythical things can happen, magical things can happen, but also like horrible things can happen. Like the blues is a place where your loved one might get on a train, never be seen again. Your loved one might just walk into the woods, never be seen again. Walk down a trail, never be seen again. Your loved one, may also mysteriously have an illness, take, and fall down and die. And,
hmm
the
hmm
blues is a
hmm
place where you'll be so sad you might wish you were dead, wish you could fall down and die. And, wish you could, wish you never been born is a big one in the blues. Also, the blues is, there's a lot of tough women in the blues.
hmm
The women
hmm
in the blues, they'll put they'll poison the men, sick their dogs on the men famously. Of course, a lot of throat slitting in the blues, a lot of backstabbing. So and there's a and all there's also this this sense of melancholy, obviously because of the the experience of Jim Crow in the African American community. So there is this pervading sense of melancholy, but there's this pervading sense of almost there's almost it's reminiscent of a bit of a, it has like hints of Southern Gothic, of
Yeah,
sort of
that's
the
where I was
Southern
going to take
Gothic
it to
tradition.
Southern Gothic. Right, yeah, because we had talked about Gothic
Mm-hmm.
literature with Edgar Allan Poe.
Right.
And kind of a a strain of Gothic literature is Southern Gothic. And that is one in which you see just like the blues, you see these sort of maybe hints, or there's like this there's like Christianity is present, in like
Mm-hmm.
Southern Gothic in the blues, but it's not necessarily like the guiding principle per se, like it's kind of like it's like almost like its ruins are visible, like
uh,
it is something that we recognize that should happen but we also know doesn't,
right.
and so that is kind of the understanding in the blues, you know it's sort of almost like this Christian ideal, but the blues is sort of the realization, maybe, or like the recognition of the falling short of that sort of ideal,
Mm.
or sort of being in this fallen state, and that's kind of Southern Gothic, as well as being mostly set in the South, you know, just like, the Mississippi blues. I mean, in the Mississippi Delta, this is where the blues occur. Also, of course, sort of this seminal Southern Gothic piece, which is, Huckleberry Finn, by and really like the writings and work of uh, gosh, what Mark Twain.
Mm.
Um, but you know, even and that reverberates even to this day, right? Like blues, rock music, like it's still on the radio. Blue, and
Right.
then, just this year. a National Book of the Award of the Year, is James, which is a retelling of, Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of that, kind of slave. Like this is part of
Good
our
point.
culture. That's why Langston Hughes is still relevant today. Even his perspective, he would similarly be just as, I think, controversial today as he was then.
Mm,
Um, and we can get back to that, but um with the Southern Gothic, like, yeah, so it's both born on the blues and the Southern Gothic literature. It's born on the Mississippi River, really.
mm.
And so there's many parallels between the blues and Southern Gothic. uh
Right. And I like how
yeah,
you pointed out that the key theme in Gothic, Southern Gothic literature is in the ruins. You're in the ruins of something. In Gothic literature
yes,
proper,
yes.
it's sort of like the
Hmm.
ruins of sort of this waspy aristocracy. And then
Hmm.
Southern
Hmm.
Gothic, you're sort of in the ruins of this plantation aristocracy or this way
Hmm.
of life, this antebellum Southern way of life. You're sort of in the ruins
Hmm.
of that, especially after such things like, Sherman's March to the Sea, General
Hmm.
Sherman burning the South down. And, this, Southern, in the blues and sort of the Jim Crow laws and the, sort of the African American way of life at the time, sort of being an outgrowth of that. And, and so, and in the blues, and what you pointed out that I love, Justin, is how there is almost a sort of in the ruins of Christianity. Christianity has a great, because the blues coming from gospel, you know,
Yes.
gospel music, the black church is almost more of an institution with the same as the plantation class. There's almost a bit of a synergy between those institutions, and in the ruins of sort of both those institutions, we have the Reconstruction period, the Jim Crow laws, but we also have the blues and then into jazz.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of my favorite, talking about blues and sort of its connections, like you said, with gospel and Christian, church music. That track, and I'm forgetting the name of it, by Lead Belly,
Oh,
in
you're
which
talking
he's
about Lead
going
Belly?
through.
He sings to children. Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah, and he's like going through, like what the Presbyterians, how they did it, how the Baptists did it, and like you hear like these blues songs and also these, like the hymns, and you can see the connection between them. It's like
right.
clear as day, with that.
And
How like in many ways, sorry, but like the blues is they're almost like secular church music in a way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that you're talking about. There's an album. If you those fans of Lead Belly out there, Lead Belly, he did an album. Lead Belly sings for children, and I think the rendition you're talking about is when he did. If I'm not mistaken, it's "You Are My Sunshine." But I
Hmm.
think he
Hmm.
carried it through.
Hmm. Hmm.
The gospel, and I think he actually referred to the gospel as maybe Baptist. I think he referred to
Hmm.
them as being
Hmm.
like this is how the Baptists used to do it, and it was
Yes.
sort of
Yeah,
more
that's what he did.
slow
Yep.
and sort of formal.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's a good little nugget. I almost forgot about that. So guys, check out
Yeah.
Lead Belly.
Yeah.
Some of my
Right.
favorite blues guys. Let's just get it. Some of my favorite blues guys. We got Lead Belly, and one of my
Hmm.
favorite favorites. We got Booker
Book
White.
of White.
Booker White. Man,
Yeah.
Booker White brings us to something that is also featured in a lot of Langston Hughes' poetry, and it's featured all over the blues, and it's the train. And I love how the
Hmm.
blues focuses on the train. The train
Hmm.
is such a symbol. I mean, don't get me wrong. How much literature focuses on the boat? The
Hmm.
boat
Hmm.
ruled literature as far as transportation was concerned for millennia. That ship has
Hmm.
sailed, yada yada. But
Hmm.
then we have
Hmm.
this new
Yep.
technology,
Yep.
the train that's sort of connecting these different parts of the
Hmm.
South, and
Hmm.
African American women are experiencing a new level of freedom, and they're able to do little odd jobs and make little money. So some of these women are not only are they poisoning their husbands, they're hopping on
Hmm.
trains and
Hmm.
never
Hmm.
being seen
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
The blues is
Hmm.
a place
Hmm.
where you love you. She treated you just like she was your baby child, treating me just like she was a baby child. But then she'll hop on a train, and you'll never see her again. Then you lay down and
Hey,
wish she had died.
mm. Hey, that's a story with a lot of, I mean, hey, even, going up the Mississippi to Chicago,
Mm, true.
you have Truman Capote. Uh, well, he was in Chicago, right? And then no, but I'm thinking I might be conflating things. 'Cause then he gets to um the stories in New York. I was thinking but that same time period, you
Mm,
have Miss Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
okay.
She's that same kind of character during the Dust Bowl, during this 1920s, 1930s, this kind of pre pre World War II America,
Mm,
uh, in which the Wild West is still kind of where it's almost like we have like civilization and the Wild West still at the same time, you
right.
know, and like she takes up and leaves Oklahoma, goes to the big city, all that. But um, you have that with the blues. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Being going up the river, like the Mississippi flowing up, culminating in
Hmm. Hmm.
obviously the blues began with the Mississippi Delta and that down home, down dirty
Hmm.
blues,
Hmm.
and obviously all
Well,
throughout the South. But as you go north on the
yeah.
Mississippi, it sort of culminates in the Chicago electric blues, the same way the
Hmm.
Mississippi
Hmm.
River
Hmm.
almost kind of culminates in Chicago. The blues almost carries the water up to become electric, the
Hmm.
electric blues.
Hmm.
And there's a mythological affinity between the blues, electricity, water, electricity. um
Hmm.
the blues, the electric blues, there's something there for the
Well, there's.
mythological or symbolic
Hmm.
viewers out there.
Hmm. 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 Well, I mean, also, jazz starts down there, also Dixieland jazz,
The Big
and
Easy,
these
New
are also.
Orleans.
Yep, yep. And but these are also like mostly guys that are like hired to you know, playing music on like riverboats, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
like it's just like, that like kind of like comes out of like this sort of culture of like music, professional there were professional musicians, you know. These were people who were professional musicians that kind of, sort of uh kind of came up with this at the time.
And
Um
Jim Crow
but
always had a looser hold on the arts, and
mhm,
so some
mhm,
of these guys, they were able to, make some money and travel, and kind of expand their minds a bit. But also it's just interesting how these professional musicians are taking the Mississippi north to Chicago, when during slave times the fear was taking the Mississippi south, to
mm,
the rice field and stuff in the deeper part of the South, where that was looked at as being terrible, obviously.
mhm, mhm. And it is an interesting, the Mississippi River is an interesting, all the cities that go along that, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi, I think that, or no, Mississippi, you have New Orleans, I think
Right.
you have Jackson, Mississippi is on the,
Right.
I believe that is, or it might, maybe not. But you have, Memphis, Tennessee. You have
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, Illinois. You have like Milwaukee. You have St.
St.
Louis.
Louis.
I skipped over St. Louis, but yeah, you have that. So it's like you kind of have all these, all these cities along that Mississippi, and yeah, you have blues traveling up that. You have barbecue traveling up that. There's certain styles of barbecue from Memphis to St. Louis.
Right.
There's, even up to, Chicago, there's, there's styles of like blues, jazz going up that. There's even, I remember I read that book Pimp, Iceberg Slim. He's
Mm.
going up from between Chicago and Milwaukee. He's like all the way on the top, the
Mm.
north side of, you even think of pimp culture, through all the way up through, the Mississippi, it's there's all kinds of things like that that kind of flow up and down that river, here in the
Right.
U.S. And that kind of stem out of that area.
So the blues is a place like people are describing a very hard life. They're living in these ruins of Christianity, and and sort of the ruins of the antebellum South, and it's interesting that speaking on that whole idea of the ruins of Christianity, the blues is the perfect setting for the mythological figure of the devil, Satan himself, to enter. So in these ruins of the Southern Church, the ruins of the antebellum South, you have these people now traveling. They're traveling around in different parts of the country. They may come to a crossroads, and one of these professional musicians we were talking about, and who's going to meet them at the crossroads? None other than Satan himself. This is an old legend
Right,
that's
right,
applied to
yes, yep.
blues artists, selling their
Hmm.
soul at the
Hmm.
crossroads, and like we
Hmm.
were just talking
Hmm.
about, really they're selling their soul for financial. It's a financial bargain. Satan is making a
Hmm.
sort of financial bargain with these people. Maybe they see sort of their newfound ability to sort of make money and earn money. There's a bit of trepidation there. So there's this, maybe that's why this figure would appear to these musicians. Or maybe there is something sinful about a seven chord. I don't know.
There could be, there very well could be.
you know, uh, you know,
It's
and
not in harmony.
you know, and in in classical music, they would often call like seven chords, or the seventh of a chord. The devil's tone, or the tritone, but they had different names for it. But like there's not a lot of classical music that uses seven, like the seventh interval of a chord, until then we get to the blues. And there's something about the seventh interval of a chord that can make a chord sound particularly sort of melancholy.
Mm. Well, that
So
is
that
true.
yeah. So
Um, hey, get on a piano, play a major chord, play a minor chord, and then play a seventh chord, you know.
yeah.
It's just like, I wish I could play it for you. Um, but I think we
Shadow.
should get into poems now.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
should go ahead. I think you went first last week. Am
Okay.
I right about that, or do you want to go first this week?
No, I think I
Because I
went
might
first
have even gone first. I
because
might have even gone first a couple of weeks in a row.
right, but because your poem is the real blues poem, so
Hmm. Hmm.
right.
Yeah. So this this is Hard Daddy, none other, by Langston Hughes here. I went to my daddy, says Daddy, I've got the blues. Went to my daddy, says Daddy, I've got the blues. My daddy says, Honey, can't you bring no better news? I cried on his shoulder, but he turned his back on me. Cried on his shoulder, but he turned his back on me. He said a woman's crying's never gonna bother me. I wish I had wings to fly like the eagle flies. Wish I had wings to fly like the eagle flies. I'd fly on my man and I'd scratch out both his eyes.
Hard Daddy by Langston
Uh,
Hughes.
hmm. Hmm. So I enjoy this poem quite a bit, and so just a couple quick things. You notice that Langston Hughes, he sticks with some poetic right then I forgot the word, but some mainstays, right? Like there's some we're capitalizing the first line of every word here, or
Okay.
the first word of every line here. Um, but there's he uses you know talking about the language, he uses the African American vernacular English, with this, that's prevalent there with ma, or ma daddy, uh and the eagle, um there you also have there's no quotation marks, instead we have, capitalization sort of, like says daddy, I've got the blues, that's where we have this, capitalized daddy, rather than in the first line where it's, went to my daddy, went to my daddy. You know, and then just as down when you say, you know, capitalized with that honey, honey, can't you bring no better news? I mean, there's a period there, but he kind of shows that quotate those sort of quotations different, so there's but there's areas in which each couplet is a complete thought, or sort of
Mm,
sentence or a complete unit, right? Each one ends in a period. So there's areas where grammar is like more and less sort of observed, I should say. Another thing with this is, with the blues, and he wrote many poems in this style, right?
right.
We have three 6-line stanzas. Um, each one we have, basically it's broken into three couplets. First couplet is repeated. That third couplet, is a response to the first two, right? It's that call and response sort of style. And you have two with each one, sort of the the like the what is it? It's the object, I went to my daddy, and the following stanza that's repeated, because the first stanza is repeated, you drop that and you go right into, to the verb, you know, went to my daddy, cried on his shoulder, wish I had wings too,
Okay.
And so you kind of you drop that the object or that of the sentence the I each time in the from the going from the first couplet to the second couplet. And another on another level too, with that call and response, you could say that this, we were talking about the 12 bar blues.
Mm,
This kind of follows that sort of 12 bar blues pattern. And in some ways you could say even from stanza to stanza, it's almost like a chord progression. I was trying to
mm.
think of it. I was like, maybe this might be like the 2-5-1,
It could be.
but so you kind of, this first stanza is, kind of like this first action, right?
Mm,
Went to my daddy, says, daddy, I've got the blues, we're going,
mm,
and within that stanza, we have the response. My daddy says, "Honey, can't you bring no better news?" But even as a whole, this stanza is almost like the first action, right? And
right.
then the next one sort of responds to that. I cried on his shoulder, but he turned his back on me. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
within that we have a response too. He said a woman's crying's never gonna bother me. You know, this is a response to the first one. And then we kind of have this sort of action wish, sort of response. With I wish I had wings to fly like I wish I had wings to fly like the eagle does. And,
Right.
I'd fly on my man and I'd scratch out both his eyes. So
Mm,
it's kind of that it's almost like a chord progression in itself where we have this sort of like first action, sort of response, and then, kind of like an action or response to that. And that's where I was like, maybe this is like the 2-5-1, I don't know, like um
well,
but to get a little, yeah, I'm gonna get a little bit deeper into the poem as well. Um,
okay.
so, so I got a few things I just want to get them out there.
All right.
But you know, kind of getting into this a little bit, right? You know, went to my daddy. Obviously, this is written from the poem or from the perspective of a woman. I'm thinking, what is, daddy? What does daddy represent? Maybe the protector, authority, foundation, maybe society, right? We know in this first stanza she's unsatisfied. She's unhappy in some way, right? She's got the
Mm,
she's got the blues. We don't know why. We don't know why she does. And the response from her daddy is, can't you bring no better news, right? He's it's insufficient, right? So cried on his shoulder, you know, but he turned his back on me. She gets no reprieve from him. There's
Mm,
no, there's no sort of empathy. We don't find out why she's unhappy, why she has the blues. He doesn't ask.
right.
He said, "A woman's cry is never gonna bother me." He said, "I wish I had wings to fly like the eagle flies." It's the eagle. The eagle's, freedom. You know,
Mm, right.
maybe even America.
Right.
Having wings, the think of that old hymn, like one day I'll fly, fly away,
Right.
you know,
I'll fly
she's
away.
seeking, yeah, yeah, I'll fly away. Yep, yep. She's seeking freedom,
Right.
seeking freedom to fly like the eagle flies. But then I'd fly on my man and I'd scratch out both his eyes. She has this desire for freedom, and scratching out his eyes, like I said, maybe daddy's, the protector, the authority. Is she scratching out both of his eyes? Is she removing, like, does she leave him behind? Does she take him
Mm,
with him? We don't know. Is she sort of taking out the sight, making blind the one who set the direction? Before,
mm,
the one who was deciding, in what direction they go. Is she just taking the wheel? Is she just taking the wheel, or is she flying off into freedom? Um, there's sort of this disillusionment, due to basically a lack of empathy from daddy, because he's a hard
mm,
daddy,
right.
you know? Because he said, can't you bring no better news? And he said, a woman's crying is never gonna bother me. He too is looking for freedom, right?
Mm, right.
He's not gonna get tied down by this bad news. He's not gonna get tied down by a woman's crying. It's not gonna
Right.
bother him, you know. He too is searching for freedom. And so from this I almost see, like, what is the woman, maybe she's the many, maybe she's the people, maybe daddy is the establishment, society. Maybe he is the one. Maybe this is the one and the many. It
Mm,
could represent that perhaps. And there's sort of this disillusionment that happens due to the lack of empathy, sort of leading to the destruction of a relationship. We don't know why she has the blues. We never know because he never asks. And
right.
in some ways, we are. She is alone. He is alone, and we're seeing sort of the breaking apart of two.
Mm,
So
okay.
that's what I want to say about this.
Okay. I definitely can see that, and I mean, when I'm thinking, the third stanza is definitely a turn. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
the third couplet in each stanza is a turn, but the third
Yep.
stanza itself is like a bigger turn.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it is interesting. She wants wings to fly like the eagle flies. But what is
Hmm.
she's gonna
Hmm.
scratch out both his eyes? Is it just for like vengeance to get back at him? Like, oh, you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt
Hmm.
you. Is it
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that she will sort of take the reins and that will be
Yeah.
sort of freedom, or is it just,
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
you know are the eyes almost something that we cry from? So is this almost, is she almost gonna soften him up by this?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
I'd
Maybe.
scratch out both of his eyes as almost like a way to soften him up, so he won't be so
Hmm.
almost
Hmm.
like such a like a hard daddy. Maybe he would
Yeah. Perhaps.
maybe he would find some sort of sympathy for me or empathy for me, and
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely found that interesting. And as far and this poem, I mean, it's a prototypical blues. And Langston Hughes, he even has po' boy blues. That's like a typical blues. It has like some lines in it that you might find
Hmm.
any number of blues singers doing a rendition of po' boy blues, and po' boy, far from home. And there's other like typical themes that we have here that are often found in the blues, like like I said, women sort of wishing to be vengeful or wishing they could sort of take a certain revenge, but also crying on the shoulder, the unrequited love, or the lover not necessarily
Hmm. Hmm.
loving you how you think maybe you should be loved.
Hmm. Hmm.
Got nobody to feel and care for me is a common phrase in the blues. Got nobody to feel for me, got nobody to care for me. Turned his back on me. Um, Said a woman's crimes never gonna bother me. You know,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
so maybe she imagines scratching out his eyes. Maybe that'll bother him. Bothering
Yeah,
him in
yeah.
some way.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, there's and we do have the repeating of the two lines with the subtle difference, and we have the African American vernacular English
Hmm.
throughout it, and yeah, it's a great poem, man. Just some of
Yeah.
the rhythm. I love the rhythm of it. I went to my daddy, daddy, I have got the blues, daddy, the blues. You know, um,
Hmm.
back on me, bother me, eagle flies, and I just love the emphasis on both his eyes. Could
Hmm.
they could just say his eyes, but this is we're talking both his eyes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Give that a little emphasis.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean some of the women in the blues, they can be a bit vicious, So this is definitely this is a great blues. It's a great blues poem, and really just leaps off the page. I mean,
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
it. And
yeah.
of all the blues poetry that I read by him, I did really enjoy this one.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, and what else, what other points did you were you kind of hitting on?
Well,
I think I'm missing something.
I'm gonna. Well, I kind of want to say something to something that you said. That scratching out the eyes, that violence. I think that is where it kind of touches on the Southern Gothic
Mm-hmm.
sort of tradition as well, where you have, in Southern Gothic literature, there is just like this kind of there's violence. It's
Right,
kind of, you see that with Cormac McCarthy.
for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, yeah. I read Wise Blood recently by oh gosh, of course I just blank on her name. I'll
Mm,
think of it, but read Wise Blood recently. I'm sure she'll forgive me that long dead poet, but very violent books, and something I want to point out, why I was kind of even, to explain the 251, why I say 251. All right, so why is one the, sort of the tonic? Why is the third verse the tonic?
mm,
Because it's that, like, yes, she wants to like scratch out his eyes. I am thinking, potentially it's either to, to at least take control, or to find, maybe she scratches out his eyes and she just leaves and he can never find her. Maybe she
mm.
scratches out his eyes so that she can now take sort of control, almost in a way. Either
Right,
take control of him in the direction they are going, or take control in the sense that she just leaves him behind,
right.
right? But there's almost like this sense of like freedom with that, like self-autonomy, and so I almost say like that is the tonic. That is, you know,
Mm,
that's the tonic. And then with this, two, why, because two is a dissonant chord, or, note, and it's like, this is where she has the blues, comes
mm,
to him with the blues. It's dissonant, and then five is, you know, he never he never really cared about you to begin with. You know, a
Right,
woman's crying's never gonna bother me.
right.
And that's almost like a reminder of the tonic, which is you are always alone, and it's you have to
Yeah, that
it's
almost
personal autonomy.
would pull towards the tonic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can
So
see
that's
that.
why I say 251 on that.
Well, 251 is used in a lot of jazz. Definitely
Hmm.
used in a lot of jazz progressions. And no, I can definitely see what you mean. It's almost like the same. It's almost like if we do it stanza by stanza, like the first couplet's the one chord, or
Hmm.
no, or the
Hmm.
first line we go the one chord, then we go the four chord, the one chord, the four chord, but then the turnaround that be the five chord, you know, and then we end on the one, My daddy says honey, that would be like the five. Then can't you bring no better? And then we end on maybe news would be on the one chord. But I can see what you mean by stand the chord progression. This is almost like a chord progression, the two, the
Hmm.
five, and
Hmm.
then we end on the one.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that
Hmm.
would be like a kind of like a jazz arrangement. Like the band would riff on the two for 12 bars, then
Yeah, yeah.
riff on the five chord for like
With
12 bars.
within that 251, you'd have that sort of 12 bar sort of
Right, right.
structure.
And
Yeah.
then Langston Hughes, his words almost become almost like a solo over
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
band,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cuz it doesn't necessarily say hard daddy blues, And
Right, it doesn't. It doesn't.
but a lot
But
of
this is written in the blues, format. But yeah,
right,
it doesn't, because he has other ones that are, po' boy blues, that
exactly.
it's explicit. This is a, blues song.
But a lot of jazz too, but there is a jazz arrangement of Po' Boy blues for sure.
Mm, mm.
I know I don't even have to Google that but a lot of blues songs were obviously reworked into jazz numbers, but
Yeah.
yeah. So this I feel like this is a great poem, man. I just love the rhythm. I just love the imagery, and I just love it's a fierce poem. And the poem I did, there were several. So I kind of had a bit of trepidation. I wasn't quite sure which way to go. I thought about doing, the Negro Speaks the Rivers, um, or the Weary Blues. I like that one a lot, but that one's kind of long. But I decided to do Catch. It's kind of a shorter one, but it kind of captures Langston Hughes. He does have a sense of humor in his poetry, but he also just has a great sense of rhythm and just the way his use of enjambment and his sort of understanding of language is phenomenal. So I'd like to do Catch by Langston Hughes. It's not that long. Um, all right, yeah, I'm just going to read it and then we'll be back in a bit to discuss it a bit.
All right, see you then.
Catch by Langston Hughes. Big Boy came carrying a mermaid on his shoulders, and the mermaid had her tail curved beneath his arm. Being a fisher boy, he'd found a fish to carry. Half fish, half girl to marry. Oh, almost cut off the last line. Being a fisher boy, he'd found a fish to carry. Half fish, half girl to marry. Oh, man, I keep end up cutting one of the lines, though. Oh, well, I guess
Yeah,
it's a little, it does not all fit on one screen, but,
I think it's fitting for the poem.
oh, then I accidentally stopped sharing the screen. But the thing about this poem is they feature a character named Big Boy, which is in several of his poems. several of his poems. There's a character in it named Big Boy. Let me see, and I think and I think Big Boy is almost representative of like sort of like the young buck, the young guy who's just like he's almost like a character that's just like always trying to get a girl, kind of like laughable, like or like a oafable sort of character, But in this instance, Big Boy, he's actually like caught him a girl this time. Big Boy came carrying a mermaid on his shoulders, and the mermaid had her tail curved beneath his arm. And so Big Boy just he's a fisher boy, sort of like he makes his living catching fish, and or spends his time catching fish. I don't know about his makes his living, but being a fisher boy, he found a fish to carry, half fish, half girl to marry. So it's almost like the same fish that he was like, or like he spends his time fishing. He was able to catch a fish and also catch a girl to marry. It turned out to be a mermaid. So we have allusions to there's other fish in the sea, or there's plenty of fish in the sea or something like that. And it's sort of like a mythical girl, like a girl that she's a fish, so he spends his time fishing. And then like he also has a girl to marry. It's sort of like what a catch type thing. What a catch for old Big Boy here. He caught himself a
Hmm.
mermaid.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, I love the rhythm of that second stanza too, because it
Yeah,
reminds me almost exactly of something that Kerouac would do. Just that
right,
being a fisher boy, he'd found a fish to carry, half fish, half girl to marry.
right,
I could almost, I could just, I could see
right.
Kerouac do, just mimicking that. So that's something that really sticks out for me. I love the rhythm of it. Um,
Big
I
Boy
think that's
came
like
carrying a
that's the
mermaid
start of
on
the
his
show,
shoulders.
Right.
The mermaid had her tail curved beneath his arm. So she actually liked him back a little bit. I guess her tail was curved
Hmm.
beneath his arm.
Well, to me, I think of it too as like Big Boy being like, you're kind of maybe even with life, like you're gonna kind of, you're gonna kind of find what you're looking for almost a little bit,
Right,
In this instance, Big Boy, he found his mermaid, maybe Big Boy is always searching for some kind of ideal, some kind of mythical type thing, and he just happened to find himself a mermaid,
right.
half fish, half girl to marry,
I mean,
uh,
yeah, I mean, every fisher boy has to find a fish to carry.
right, right, yeah. I mean, and she comes. I mean, she's right in along. He's a fisher boy.
Right.
And so a fisher boy finds a mermaid, a half fish, half girl.
Being a fisher boy, he found a fish to carry.
Hmm.
So he's happy. I guess we all wish we could, find not just find a fish to have, but find one that's actually worth maybe carrying around town. Wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, in this, you can almost think he's almost like he's walking around, with a smile on his face with this
Right,
mermaid over his shoulder. That's how it looks. Like he's like,
right.
he's got one.
Hey, he finally found a fish to carry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Half fish, half girl to marry. And I guess when and this was back in the day. I guess when men would maybe almost not. I mean, I guess men sort of do that, but I guess I feel like the whole courting thing was probably stronger
Mm-hmm.
back in these
Hmm.
days. So
Perhaps. Perhaps.
he's almost like he caught a fish, and he's he almost found a girl to marry.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe. I mean, he came from his father was a fisherman, his grandfather was a fisherman. These are men who
Right,
fish.
right,
And he finally caught one, you know. He found one to carry, It's a half fish, half girl, maybe she's all, maybe he used the same techniques to fish to catch this girl,
mm,
Maybe she's kind of a fish of a girl,
right.
you know, and he caught one. maybe to carry, maybe, maybe she's just a pretty little fish who can't really do anything.
Right.
I don't, you know?
Who knows? And I mean, and there's something about women and fish. The sign, the feminine sign Pisces the sign of the fish. It's about faith. So you maybe you got to be when you find a girl to marry. It's almost like a bit of faith, like you almost put a bit of faith
I mean,
in it,
even Jesus taught him to fish. He's a fisher of men,
right?
this guy's a fisher of women.
Right.
Big
Hey.
boy's a fisher of women.
So yeah, so I mean, this is like a little. It's a poem that's a bit more humorous. I know Langston Hughes was known for some of the more heavier kind of stuff, but I just thought, I just like this one, and plus, I like the rhythm and the setup, and I just like the whole vibe of this poetry.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
something about it that's really doing it for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
It,
even this use
it
of
got, yeah.
punctuation here to carry
Mm.
half fish, half girl to marry.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, it reminds me of Ezra Pound, who we had done recently, who also was influenced by jazz and wanted to take, poetry from the metronome to the musical phrase. To me, this is a musical phrase. This is almost like a good guitar lick.
Right,
Like this is like maybe a couple guitar licks. This is like a little phrase that he just, wrote up on the guitar real quick. That's what this poem is to me, you
right,
know it's good enough to like keep where you're like, damn, like that 17 seconds, if you could only stretch that out for 3 minutes, I mean, that'd be
right.
something, you know?
You could only
You
lay it
know, and
down on a trumpet.
exactly, exactly, right. Yeah, if you could only, that ham and eggs. That's what this is. This is like a little ditty.
Yeah,
This is almost like a little ditty, but it's like it's real good. Whatever it is, it's just this like sweet
right.
little nothing. Um,
And he's got
'Cause, yeah,
plenty of these. He's got plenty of these little
hmm
morsels.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, so yeah, he's not bound to the metronome,
No.
especially with this one.
Being a fisher boy, he found a fish to carry. Half fish, half girl to marry. So
Yeah,
yeah,
great rhythm.
great rhythm. And one thing just hit me. What I wanted to mention about your poem was
Mm.
how she was addressing her lover as daddy, kind of had incestuous vibes, and it
There
just
was, yeah.
and it just sort of reminded me of Oedipus when Oedipus put his eyes out.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oedipus, the
Mm.
other
Hmm.
famous.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
just sort of
Hmm.
have
Yeah.
this
Yeah, because
ince-
it does it could be a lover. I'd fly on my man, and that sounds like she's addressing a lover. But then,
hmm
with daddy, it sounds like, maybe a father figure, maybe, and that's where it's like almost like this authority, maybe this one who's setting the direction, the tone,
and that's common
yeah.
in blues for
Hmm.
women or for husbands to be referred to as daddy, or men in their life, or you know
I mean, if you'd say, hip hop is an extension of the blues, you'd say it with, where you see guys calling women mommy, you know, and,
mm.
you still have, women being, or men being referred to as daddy, and,
I said, come back daddy, stay right here with me. you know um
hey, ma.
there is something that, this is a phenomenon. It's evidenced even in in Latin American cultures. There's this
Hmm.
mommy poppy thing is much more. I feel like
Hmm.
I think that's sort of phasing out in America, but and in the English speaking world. But I guess at one point in time, this sort of referring to your lover as mommy, mama, and daddy. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that was
I
probably
mean,
much more popular.
yeah. I mean, I love it when you call me Big Papa.
Oh
Yeah.
hey.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing I did want to mention. But yeah,
Hmm.
Langston Hughes, man. I almost can't say anything except go read the poetry.
Read about him, yeah, just learn about Langston Hughes, that's all I can really say. I think because I think he's actually a poet who's I'm often not really into this where I'm like, oh, I want to like learn about the artist, but I think it Langston Hughes is an artist that's worth kind of learning about his the context of him and his work.
Mm,
And just kind of I think it's worth anybody during our time to learn a little bit more about the Harlem Renaissance, to learn about Langston Hughes, just
right.
because they are, sort of particularly relevant with, um, just current events, in America over the last few years.
Yeah. Hey, I agree. I think so as well. Um, yeah, and hey, I guess this is kind of a bit
Yeah,
shorter
right. Yeah, but I mean,
episode.
just something. It's crazy. Harlem Renaissance is pre, the sort of what do we call that? The
Well,
civil revolution, the revolutionary, times of the civil disobedience, like
the
Langston
civil
Hughes is
rights
pre
era.
Martin Luther King civil rights era.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's before that, the 1920s, 1930s. This is, a
Mm.
generation before the civil rights era,
Yeah.
and with the Harlem Renaissance. So it's just
Which Martin Luther King was aware of Langston Hughes.
right, of course, yeah, yeah. Right. Well, I mean,
We heard him read one of his poems. Which one? I can't
mother to
remember.
son.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the one. Oh, yeah. Life hasn't been, ain't been no crystal
Nope.
stair.
Right, yeah. Which I didn't know before that was like I didn't realize that like a Langston Hughes poem was read right before or recited right before he's saying if you can't walk, run,
Right. Yeah.
or if you
Yeah.
can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl,
Right.
but
Right.
that's like who doesn't know that? Like
Right.
that's like one of his like, seminal quotes. I didn't realize that right before he said that he was reciting a Langston Hughes poem, which is,
And Martin Luther, and I do
that
think,
goes if that doesn't go to show you like, hey,
yeah, I mean, hey, and Martin Luther King, I mean, I can, he's one of the greatest speakers. I mean, he's might be the greatest American speaker.
You talk about, Mount Rushmore of Americans. You got Abe Lincoln, George Washington, Martin Luther King,
Right.
Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior,
Santa
Greatest Americans all
Claus,
time. Right,
Santa
yeah.
Claus, and LeBron James. That rounds it about
So,
out.
no, I mean, come on. Chris Kringle. Yeah.
America.
Yeah. I mean, Martin Luther King is right up there with Chris Kringle,
Right.
Jesus Christ, LeBron James,
Um.
yeah, Muhammad Ali,
Right. But yeah, guys. I mean,
but
so I mean, hey, I mean, I guess one of the old adages of writing is keep it simple, stupid. So I've kind of
hmm
said what I've had to say about Langston Hughes. I can't believe it's
right.
only been an hour though. But
I mean,
hey,
hey, some of the best I feel like we've done like much quicker, actually. We thought we were going to talk about Edgar Allan Poe forever.
yeah,
That was
true.
kind of a quicker episode for us.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, yeah, and I guess Langston Hughes. I mean, we covered a lot of it. Yeah, and I might even. I mean, a lot of his work is in the public domain now, but I might
yeah.
even just look at getting his complete work or something because he also wrote some works of fiction as well.
Yeah, he wrote quite a bit. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, first to live solely off of his writings, he didn't just write poetry. He wrote many different kind of forms. He wrote plays. Um, he wrote fiction. Um, what's that popular short story by him where the
Or
little
the one
boy is like stealing from trying to steal from the woman.
is it by him or is it the one that was named after a line in his poetry?
I believe it was written by him.
I don't. I'm not sure. I know you're not talking. I don't think you're talking about a raisin in the sun.
No, I'm not. No,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not
no,
sure.
this is a short story. Yeah, yeah, no. Hey, whatever. But yeah, he wrote many other forms. So Um, but hey, I mean, thanks for watching, listening.
Yeah,
We got to get these maybe in some other formats. So wherever you're liking this, probably on
right.
YouTube right now, hit the like button, subscribe, you know. I know,
Bebop, bebop that like button, subscribe.
bebop it, maybe I'm trying to think of something going along with that. Share it,
Yeah,
maybe a friend wants to hear about some Langston Hughes,
yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe you and your friend write some poetry. Send it in.
Share it with us. Yeah,
Right.
put it
Verse
in the
take
comment section.
verse take at
Right.
gmail.com is our email.
It is.
I
It
need to
is.
start putting that
Yeah.
in the description.
Right. Right. Yeah, so email us for inquiries and
Bookings. You can book us.
yeah, business and otherwise.
Yeah. I only fly business class. Business class or better. Um
If you were looking to send us money for any reason at all, email us at versetake@gmail.com.
please. If you
Yeah.
want this
Yes.
podcast to continue.
Right. Yeah. If you want to pay us, just
or if you just
just email
or
us.
if you want
Yeah.
to help us knock out some student loans. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, if you want us to keep on putting out this great content, I mean, come on, people.
But hey, this has been Verse Take. I'm James, guys.
Yeah, first take, Justin,
Si-
thank you.
signing out.
Sayonara.